It was an ordinary summer afternoon in the small town of Maplewood. The kind where kids played outside until the streetlights flickered on and parents called them in for dinner. But for Sarah Thompson, that day would change everything. Her daughter Emily had been playing in the backyard, just a few steps away from the kitchen window where Sarah was washing dishes. She could hear Emily's laughter as she chased butterflies with her favorite pink butterfly net. And then, silence. At first, Sarah didn't think much of it. Children often get distracted by something new or wander off to explore. But when minutes turned into hours, and Emily was nowhere to be found, panic set in. That was 12 years ago. Today, Sarah still wakes up every morning hoping against hope that one day, she'll find answers to the question that has haunted her. What happened to Emily? The disappearance tore through their family like a storm, leaving behind scars that never fully healed. Sarah became consumed by guilt, replaying that afternoon over and over again in her mind, wondering if there was anything she could have done differently. Her husband, Mark, tried to hold things together, but the strain pulled at the seams of their marriage. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, pointing fingers without evidence, while police investigations led to dead ends. The once close-knit community fractured under the weight of unanswered questions. As time passed, life moved on for everyone else, but for Sarah, each sunrise felt heavier than the last. Every birthday, holiday, and milestone only served as a painful reminder of the gaping hole left in their lives. Then, just last week, something changed. Sarah was cleaning out the hall closet when she stumbled upon an old shaving kit belonging to Mark. It had been tucked away in the back corner, forgotten amidst piles of unused blankets and photo albums they hadn't opened in years. Curiosity got the better of her, and she unzipped the worn leather pouch. Inside, she found the usual items: a razor, some shaving cream, a comb, but tucked beneath those mundane objects was something that made her blood run cold. A faded photograph, slightly crumpled at the edges, showed Emily sitting on a swing, smiling brightly into the camera. On the back of the photo, written in shaky handwriting, were 2 words that sent chills down Sarah's spine: "I'm sorry." Her heart pounded as she stared at the image, memories flooding back like a tidal wave. How had this ended up in Mark's shaving kit? Why hadn't he mentioned it before? Questions swirled in her mind, each more unsettling than the last. Was this a clue that had been hiding in plain sight all these years? Or was it something darker, a confession, perhaps? Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the photograph, torn between confronting Mark immediately and needing time to process what she'd discovered. One thing was certain: this wasn't just another piece of the puzzle, it felt like the beginning of a whole new mystery. Mark had always been supportive during the search for Emily, attending countless meetings with detectives, plastering posters around town, and even organizing volunteer groups to comb nearby woods. He wore his grief openly, never shying away from talking about their daughter or keeping her memory alive. But now, doubts crept into Sarah's mind. Had she missed something? Could the man she trusted most in the world be hiding secrets too painful to imagine? She thought back to the days following Emily's disappearance, the sleepless nights, the arguments, the way Mark sometimes seemed distant, lost in his own thoughts. At the time, she chalked it up to stress, but now those moments took on a sinister undertone, as Sarah sat alone in the dimly lit living room, clutching the photograph. She realized how much had shifted over the past 12 years. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt hollow, like a shell of its former self. Friends stopped visiting long ago, unable to bear the weight of Sarah's sorrow. Work became her only distraction, though even that offered little relief. Meanwhile, Mark had thrown himself into his job, traveling frequently and coming home exhausted. They rarely talked anymore, their conversations reduced to polite exchanges about bills and groceries. The connection they once shared had faded, replaced by a quiet tension neither of them knew how to address. Now, with this discovery, Sarah wondered if their relationship had been built on lies all along. The photograph wasn't the only strange thing she noticed recently. Over the past few months, Sarah began experiencing odd occurrences around the house, doors left slightly ajar when she was sure she'd closed them, faint noises in the middle of the night, and the eerie feeling of being watched. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia, a natural side effect of carrying such heavy grief for so long. But now, holding the picture in her hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was trying to tell her something. Was it possible that Emily was still out there, alive and waiting to be found? Or was this someone's twisted attempt to torment her further? Either way, Sarah knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah decided to dig deeper. She started by going through old boxes in the attic, searching for anything else that might shed light on the mystery. Among yellowed newspaper clippings and faded Polaroids, she found a journal she hadn't seen in years. It belonged to Emily, filled with childish scribbles and drawings of flowers and animals. Flipping through the pages, Sarah's eyes landed on a single sentence scrawled near the end. "Daddy said not to tell anyone." Her breath caught in her throat. What was Emily referring to? And why would Mark tell her to keep quiet? The more Sarah uncovered, the more tangled the web of secrets became. Just as she was about to confront Mark, the doorbell rang, startling her out of her thoughts. Standing on the porch was Detective Harris, the same officer who had worked tirelessly on Emily's case all those years ago. His presence brought a mix of emotions: relief that someone else cared, fear of what he might reveal, and anger at the injustice of it all. Without hesitation, Sarah invited him inside, desperate to share what she'd found. As she handed him the photograph, his expression darkened, and he muttered something under his breath. "Sarah," he said slowly, "there's something you need to know." Before he could finish, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted them. Mark was home. Now, standing frozen in the hallway, Sarah faced a choice. Should she confront Mark outright, risking everything she thought she knew about her husband and their life together? Or should she wait, gather more evidence, and try to piece together the fragments of this baffling puzzle? Whatever decision she made, one thing was clear: the answers she sought were closer than she ever imagined, and they carried the potential to destroy what little remained of her world. As the front door creaked open and Mark stepped inside, oblivious to the storm brewing within their walls, Sarah braced herself for what came next. But would she be ready for the truth? Mark walked in, his face relaxed and unassuming, as if he had no idea what was waiting for him. He greeted Sarah with a casual smile, tossing his keys onto the side table. "Hey, "How was your day?" he asked, his voice steady. But Sarah couldn't respond. Her mind raced, replaying the photograph, Emily's journal entry, and Detective Harris standing just a few feet away in the living room. Mark noticed her silence and furrowed his brow. "Is everything okay?" he asked, stepping closer. His tone was calm, but there was a flicker of something else beneath it. Was it concern, or was it caution? Sarah didn't know anymore. Detective Harris appeared in the doorway, his presence breaking the tension momentarily. "Mark," he said, his voice firm but measured, "we need to talk." Mark's expression shifted instantly, confusion giving way to unease. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between Sarah and the detective. For a split second, Sarah thought she saw a panic flash in his eyes, but it was gone before she could be sure. Harris gestured toward the living room, and they all moved. Inside, the air thick with unspoken questions. As they sat down, Sarah finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "I found this in your shaving kit," she said, holding out the photograph. Mark's reaction was immediate. He froze, his face draining of color. "Where did you get that?" Mark asked sharply, his voice rising. Sarah flinched at the sudden change in his demeanor. This wasn't the man she'd shared her life with for over 15 years. This was someone else entirely. "It doesn't matter where I found it," she shot back, her own anger bubbling to the surface. "What matters is why you've been hiding it. Why does it say 'I'm sorry' on the back? What do you have to be sorry about, Mark?" The room fell silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Mark stared at the floor, his jaw clenched tight, refusing to meet her gaze. Detective Harris leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Thompson, we've reopened Emily's case based on new information. If you know anything, even the smallest detail, you need to tell us now." Mark hesitated, his hands gripping the edge of the chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. Finally, he let out a shaky breath and looked up. "I didn't want to believe it," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I think I might know who took Emily." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She felt dizzy, her vision blurring, as the weight of his confession sank in. For years, Sarah had clung to the hope that Emily had wandered off and gotten lost, that maybe she was living somewhere far away, unaware of the chaos she'd left behind. But now, hearing Mark's words, that fragile hope shattered. Someone had taken her daughter, and worse. Mark seemed to have known something all along. "What are you talking about?" Sarah demanded, her voice cracking. "Who took her? And why didn't you say anything?" Mark rubbed his temples, looking older than she'd ever seen him. "It's complicated," he muttered. "You wouldn't understand." That was when Sarah snapped. "Don't you dare tell me I wouldn't understand," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "That's our daughter we're talking about." "You owe me the truth." Mark recoiled, guilt etched into every line of his face. "It's not that simple," he insisted. "There are things you don't know, things I couldn't tell you without putting you in danger." Danger, the word hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. Sarah's mind raced. What could possibly put them in danger after all? "These years," Detective Harris interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension. "Start from the beginning, Mark. Leave nothing out." Mark nodded reluctantly, taking a deep breath. "It started about 6 months before Emily disappeared," he said slowly. I was working late one night when I got a call from an unknown number. The person on the other end claimed to have information about some illegal activities happening within my company. They threatened to expose me unless I cooperated. Sarah listened in stunned silence, her stomach churning. Illegal activities? She'd always trusted Mark, believed in his integrity. Could he really be involved in something criminal? I tried to ignore it at first, Mark continued, his voice hollow. But then they started sending messages, photos of you and Emily, notes about your daily routines. They knew everything about us, Sarah. Everything. That's when I realized they weren't just after me. They were using you and Emily to keep me in line. Sarah felt sick. All those years ago, when Emily vanished, she'd assumed it was random, senseless. But now, hearing Mark's story, it sounded deliberate, calculated. So what did you do? She whispered, afraid of the answer. I paid them off, Mark admitted, shame washing over his features. At first, it was small amounts I could afford to lose. But then they demanded more. When I couldn't pay, they sent me that photo of Emily with the note. They said she'd be safe as long as I kept quiet and followed their instructions. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. And you never thought to tell me any of this? She cried. Not once in 12 years did you think I deserved to know the truth. Mark looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. I wanted to protect you, he said softly. I thought if I stayed silent, they'd leave you alone. I thought I could fix it. But fixing it wasn't that simple. Over the years, Mark had become entangled in a web of lies and deceit, each decision pulling him deeper into a world he couldn't escape. And now, sitting in their living room, surrounded by ghosts of the past, it was clear that his choices had cost them everything, including their daughter. Detective Harris scribbled notes furiously, piecing together the fragments of Mark's story. If what you're saying is true, he said gravely, then whoever took Emily is still out there. And they're not going to stop until they get what they want. As the gravity of the situation settled over them, Sarah realized something else. The strange occurrences around the house, the creaking doors, the whispers in the night, they weren't in her head. Someone had been watching them, waiting for what? For Mark to slip up, for Sarah to uncover the truth, or for something far worse. She glanced at the photograph again, the faded image of Emily staring back at her with innocent eyes. We need to find her, Sarah said firmly, her voice shaking but resolute. No matter what it takes. Detective Harris nodded. We'll do everything we can, he promised. But as he stood to leave, his expression told a different story, one of uncertainty and urgency. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and casting long shadows across the room. For the first time in years, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope, but it came hand in hand with fear. Because if they were close to finding Emily, they were also dangerously close to whoever had taken her. And whoever that was, they clearly had no intention of letting her go without a fight. As Detective Harris left, Sarah turned to Mark, her emotions a chaotic mix of anger, fear, and determination. We're going to find her, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Mark nodded, his face pale but resolute. For the first time in years, they were united by a single purpose, bringing Emily home. But as they began sifting through old files, emails, and phone records, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights made her skin crawl. She knew they were running out of time. The next morning, Detective Harris returned with news that sent chills down their spines. "We traced the anonymous calls Mark received back to a man named Victor Kane," he explained, laying out photos on the kitchen table. Victor was a shadowy figure with ties to organized crime, known for exploiting people's weaknesses to manipulate them into doing his bidding. "He's dangerous," Harris warned. "If he realizes you're on to him, there's no telling what he might do." Sarah stared at the photo of Victor, her mind racing. This man had taken her daughter. He had haunted their lives for 12 long years. And now, finally, they had a name. But just as they thought they were closing in, another piece of the puzzle fell into place, this one far more unsettling. While digging through Mark's old work documents, Sarah stumbled upon an email thread between him and someone using the alias Watcher. The messages were cryptic, filled with veiled threats and demands. What caught her attention, though, was the last line of the final message. "She's still alive. Bring the money to the cabin." Sarah's breath hitched. The cabinet was a remote property Mark had inherited from his uncle years ago, one they hadn't visited since before Emily disappeared. Could Emily really be there? Without wasting a moment, they called Detective Harris, who quickly assembled a team to investigate. As they drove toward the cabin, under the cover of darkness, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Each mile brought them closer to answers but also to danger. When they arrived, the scene was eerily quiet, the only sound the rustling of leaves. In the wind, the cabin loomed ahead, its windows dark and foreboding. Detectives moved in cautiously, weapons drawn, while Sarah and Mark waited anxiously outside. Then, it happened. A faint cry pierced the silence, a child's voice, calling for help. Sarah froze, her knees buckling beneath her. It couldn't be, could it? Before anyone could stop her, she bolted toward the sound, bursting through the door of the cabin. Inside, amidst the dust and decay, she saw her. Emily, older now, but unmistakably hers. Her daughter sat huddled in a corner, thin and pale, but alive. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she rushed to embrace her, holding her so tightly she feared she might break. "You're safe now," she whispered over and over again, as if saying it enough times would make it true. Victor Kane was arrested that night, along with several accomplices involved in his operation. It turned out he had been using Emily as leverage against Mark, knowing her disappearance would keep him compliant. For 12 years, Emily had been kept hidden, moved from place to place to avoid detection. She didn't remember much about her life before, but she recognized Sarah instantly, clinging to her like a lifeline. The reunion was bittersweet. Joy mingled with the weight of all they'd lost in the weeks that followed. The family worked to rebuild their shattered lives. Therapy sessions became a regular part of their routine, helping them process the trauma and reconnect as a family. Mark faced legal consequences for his role in enabling Victor's schemes. But Sarah stood by him, determined to move forward together. They owed it to Emily to give her the stable, loving home she deserved after everything she'd endured. Reflecting on the ordeal, Sarah realized how fragile life truly is, and how precious. She learned that guilt and secrets can eat away at even the strongest bonds. But honesty and forgiveness have the power to heal. Most importantly, she discovered the unbreakable strength of a mother's love, a force capable of overcoming unimaginable odds. As she tucked Emily into bed one evening, watching her daughter drift off to sleep with a peaceful smile, Sarah felt a sense of closure she hadn't thought possible. Their journey wasn't over, but for the first time in 12 years, she dared to hope for happiness, for healing, and for a future where Emily's laughter filled their home once more.